We live in a society that measures worth by utility. What you produce, how useful you are to others, and how well you conform to market demands. This narrow view traps us in cycles of external validation and performance anxiety. It tells you your value is transactional. Ask yourself, how often do you hear someone's worth described by what they do rather than who they are? This mindset has become so ingrained that we mistake productivity for purpose and busyness for value. This isn't just limiting, it's toxic. It disconnects us from the infinite potential within us, forcing us to chase fleeting approval instead of cultivating lasting self-worth. So this is the root of misunderstanding of the word value. I've heard value be explained as a transferable means of exchange. For example, knowledge is value because I can transfer it. Skills are value because I can transfer my skill and exchange it for something. Time is value because I can transfer my time and exchange it for something. Expertise is value because I can transfer my expertise and exchange it for something. So maybe this is correct in the market or business sense between customer and producer, but this description is entirely incomplete. To dig deeper and to think of how value affects all of our lives, how we can make ourselves more valuable by discovering and recognizing the true infinite value in ourselves and others, value goes beyond being a transferable means of exchange. So the Bible describes us as valuable human beings before us being useful. When God created humanity, He didn't say it is useful, He declared it is good. This statement is not just an affirmation, it is a profound truth. Our value does not begin with what we do, it begins with who we are. We are made in His image, inherently imbued with infinite worth. God does call us to be useful when He says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Genesis 1:28. However, this is not before the Bible says that humans are made in the image of God. Genesis 1:27. The Bible places value before usefulness. So should we. Over time, we have forgotten this. We've allowed societal structures to distort our understanding of value, making us believe it's only measurable through exchange. Knowledge for power, skills for income, time for approval. So what do you think? Value is deeper than just a medium of exchange. Economists Thomas Sowell and Friedrich Hayek, they had the subjective nature of value. That's what their perspective. So F.A. Hayek and Thomas Sowell, they reminded us the subjectivity of value. Sowell speaks of how money over time loses its value due to inflation and taxation. So this is a concept painfully familiar to anyone who's seen their purchasing power from their money shrinks. Thomas Sowell explains that the government can quietly steal a lot of your wealth with even low rates of inflation. For example, a $100 bill at the end of the 20th century will buy less than a $20 bill could buy in 1960. If you put $1,000 in your piggy bank in 1960 and took it out to spend in 2000, you would discover that your money had lost 80% of its value. Further, Thomas Sowell illustrates how inflation transfers a percentage of everyone's wealth to a government that expands the money supply. Inflation takes a percentage from the poorest person as it does from the richest. Income taxes transfer money from your current income to the government, but they do not touch the wealth you've already saved. So inflation, on the other hand, it erodes the value of both. So the disproportionate effect hits the poorest the hardest. So while the rich can convert their money into assets like real estate or gold that rise with inflation, the poorest often rely on savings or cash that loses their value. So even worse, welfare recipients climbing out of poverty could face a tax and lost benefits. So when an increase in income leads to a loss of welfare that can amount to a marginal tax rate of 150%, far more than millionaires would pay. So this is the process of value transfer. raises. And so this process of value transfer, it raises questions. So does this kind of exchange still count as value? Because perhaps it is value for the government, but is it for you? When your value is taken without your consent, can it still be called value? So, or does it become theft? So that question lies with, is value, if something is value, is it inherently, is it good actually? So this reflection brings us to an essential insight. Value does not always benefit all parties, depending on what type of value we're talking about, especially in the business sense. So I don't think that value specifically means that it's a means of exchange, because a means of exchange, in my opinion, should benefit both parties. Like money is a medium of exchange. Ironically, some people say value is a means of exchange. So I'm transferring you something that I have value for something that you value, and I want what you have that you value, and you want what I have that you value. So we're exchanging it. That's what people say in the business sense. But if our property that we value is being compensated without our consent, is that process still valuable? Does that mean that it's still valuable? But perhaps what we have is valuable, but is the process of it being exchanged valuable? And I argue that it's not, because I believe it has to benefit both. Not only that, I also go deeper and think that I challenge myself to think that value goes beyond just material. It's inherently who we are, who you are. The deeper that you go discovering yourself and exploring yourself, the more valuable you become. So I shared that taxation explanation from the studies of Thomas Sowell, from a snippet of his essay, to explain how value works in the external sense, in the internal sense. I believe that it's a connection, that if art is something that we value, that we've worked hard for, and that we are earning, is being compensated, I believe that it does take a bit of who we are externally, an extension of us from us. But on the contrary, our property, our body, our greatest asset, and deeply internal, our spirit, it's infinite. That's why I say our spirit is indomitable. There is nothing that can take that internal value away from you. So infinite value is something that I've started studying, looking deep into. It's beyond the transaction. And this is what I'm talking about. If you will accept that not all value is good, you must consider the idea of infinite value. So a value that is not bound by transactions or scarcity, but exists as an enduring divine force. Infinite value has no end. It's infinite. We, as finite beings, may have limits, but our indomitable spirit created in God's image does not. This is why I gave scriptures about God. When he created human, he said, this is good, because this is valuable. We are valuable. He created us in his image. So we're in his image, and he goes, this is good. Now this is useful. Now the meaning needs to change. This is good. We are holy. We are perfect in him. This is why discovering ourselves is not a task for today or tomorrow, but for a lifetime. This is why I always talk about chasing the highest version of yourself. It's a life journey. The more you do it, the more commitment you do it every single day, the more valuable you become, because the more you become you, the more you discover you, the more you explore you. You is the highest version of yourself that you will never meet in this lifetime, but you will meet at past death. So, as we peel back layers of who we are, we uncover the divine spark within, a balanced potential for creativity, connection, and contribution, breaking the chains of conventional thinking. Nietzsche, in his Genealogy of Morality, the book that he wrote, challenge us to reevaluate Friedrich Nietzsche. Some people call him Nietzsche. Some people says Nietzsche. I sometimes say Nietzsche. I sometimes say Friedrich Nietzsche, but he's the same guy. I think it just depends on if you're German or whatnot, how you will actually pronounce his name. But I actually think the correct term is Friedrich Nietzsche. That's what I believe. But anyways, in his Genealogy of Morality, the book, Friedrich Nietzsche is somebody that I study deeply. He challenged us to reevaluate all our values. That's why I really like Friedrich Nietzsche, because he challenges the status quo, and he has a very strong, convincing perspective on a variety of things that I like. Some things he says can come off wrong, but it takes a person to really think really deeply on the infinite potential of a human being, because that's what Nietzsche talks about. That's what Nietzsche believes. And he believes a lot of things that exist in our world limits who we are in our mind to really unleash the full potential of ourselves, the highest version of ourselves, in what he calls the Overman, the Übermensch. So that's why I like studying him. I like digging deep into his ideas, his thoughts, and I like talking. I just started thinking about, I'm going to discover value more, because a lot of the great thinkers, I know they talk heavily about it, and they have different perspectives on it, and they have very unique writings, essays, research, studies on value. And I hear the word gets tossed around a lot, but a lot of people don't really specifically explain in depth what value actually means, because I don't think a lot of people actually know what it means. So this is why I did this video. This is why I wrote the letter. And this is why I will continue to study it. And this is why it will be a part of my brand, part of my ethos, part of my theme. Value. You know, some people just talks about focus. Some people just talks about studying, or some people just talks about the mind. Me, I talk about all that stuff: psychology, soul, spirit, mind. You know, I talk about all that stuff, but value is something that I want to throw into that as well, because I think it's very important. I think it's very important to discover and to understand, because it's significant. So he critiques the slave morality of conformity and the master morality of those who dare to define their own worth. That's what I'm talking about. So Nietzsche's philosophy isn't about nihilism or abandoning values. It's about reclaiming them. It's about breaking free from societal definitions that stifle individuality and creativity. The greatest individuals in history didn't let society define their value. They created their own. I'll say that again. The greatest individuals in history didn't let society define their value. They created their own. So, very briefly, I talked to this guy yesterday. I was doing a Zoom call. He's a very well-respected, prominent, pioneering individual in Hollywood. I had a Zoom call, chat with him. He worked on a bunch of big budget movies and everything, and he pretty much was talking to me about creating and setting my own path, and not just looking for the next job in the business, or being very careful of working with people just to get a job, and I get tied into that loop, and they can create my own path for me, and I can be tempted to follow that path that they created for me just because I want a job. So I say that to say that that's the equivalence of most people today. You, just because you probably want a job, or you're being raised that you should go to school, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you don't want to disappoint somebody, or you're afraid because your next bill won't be paid, whatever the case might be, you have to really have the courage to discover you, and to listen, not to external forces, not to external sources, not to other people, but listen to yourself. You need to sit down, and you need to listen to what yourself is telling you deeply. You may think that you are, but you're not. Not if you're following the path that others set out for you. Not if you're doing things that you know deep down inside you, more than likely your heart is not into it. You see what I'm saying? So you need to create and set out your own path, because if you don't, others is going to do it for you. If you don't design your own life, others will design your own life for you. So that's that. So these people, they rejected the notion that their worth was tied to utility, and instead embraced their infinite potential, their divine image. Nietzsche also highlights the role of our drives in shaping what we value, our ambitions, passions, and instincts. These are not mere impulses, they are the foundation of what we would hold dear. But here's the catch: if we don't reflect on these drives, we risk becoming slaves to them. True freedom comes from understanding and aligning these inner forces with a higher purpose. So, the psychology of valuing. What does it mean to truly value something? Nietzsche saw our drives as the bedrock of human behavior. These drives, forces like ambition, curiosity, and creativity, are the psychological engines behind what we care about. They aren't purely mental, they're embodied, manifesting in everything from physical sensations to deep emotional impulses. But Nietzsche went further. He suggested that our drives themselves, value, for instance, is a drive of power that doesn't merely seek power. It prioritizes it above all else. So this perspective challenges the conventional view that we consciously choose our values. Instead, Nietzsche argued that we are often guided, something unknowingly, by the dominant drives within us. Still, this doesn't mean we are helpless. So reflecting on our drives and aligning them with a higher purpose allows us to take control of what we value, turning unconscious impulses to intentional actions. So this internal, this intention, this spark within us, if we focus more on connecting with the divine, that will drive us into meeting our infinite potential. So values beyond the individual. Value don't just exist within us. They shape societies. Nietzsche's On the Genealogy of Morality explores how cultural values I guess, I don't really like this idea, but it is, I mean, I don't want to say I don't like this idea, but it doesn't really so much resonate with me entirely, because I love the idea that value is inherently in us, within us, and it's more of who we are than anything. But I do have to accept the external as well. So values go beyond the individual. Friedrich Nietzsche discovered this idea in the genealogy of morality. Values don't just exist within us, they shape societies. Friedrich Nietzsche's The Genealogy of Morality explores how cultural values evolve over time. He examined how Christian morality replaced pagan ethics, critiquing its emphasis on guilt, obligation, and asceticism. And what I mean by asceticism is that asceticism is a severe discipline and avoidance of all forms of indulgence, typically for religious reasons. So that's what asceticism is. So you can just think of it of a rigorous, disciplined lifestyle. Like, well, I guess you could say like Buddhism, but like just a real strict Christian, you know, like somebody like Paul. And so that's what asceticism. As a societal level, values influence everything. Our laws, traditions, and collective mindset. Nietzsche argued that these systems often suppress creativity and greatness, promoting conformity over excellence. Yet, he also acknowledged their complexity. While societal values can stifle individual potential, they also provide meaning and structure for many. So this duality underscores the need to critically evaluate societal norms, questioning whether they uplift or constrain us. So this is the structure of values. Is there a single overarching value that guides all others? Nietzsche often prioritized power, writing that what is good is everything that heightens the feeling of power. But power in Nietzsche's philosophy isn't about domination, it's about growth, creativity, and overcoming resistance. So still, Nietzsche didn't limit himself to one value. Creativity, affirmation, and magnificence were equally vital. His philosophy invites us to embrace a nexus of values, rejecting simplistic hierarchies in favor of a dynamic, interconnected approach. So, the strategy of critique. Nietzsche's critique of values takes multiple forms: internal critique, functional critique, effect-based critique, expressive critique. Internal critique, he's holding moral systems accountable to their own standards. For example, exposing the vengeful resentment underlying Christian morality's preaching of compassion. Functional critique, questioning whether moral systems fulfill their intended purposes and whether those purposes are inherently good. Effect-based critique, analyzing how values impact individual and social flourishing, particularly their effects on creativity and greatness. Expressive critique, evaluating the underlying life-affirming or life-negating attitudes that values express. So these strategies encourage us to move beyond life-negating values, fostering a more dynamic life-affirming perspective. So the debate over objectivity, are values real? So this is a question that haunts every discussion about value, about what value is. Are values objective truths, or are they merely preferences shaped by culture, society, or individual perspective? This debate is particularly vivid in Nietzsche's philosophy, as he challenges to reevaluate values not only in their meaning but also in their legitimacy. So some interpret Nietzsche as a realist, suggesting that his preferred values, whether power, life, or creativity, possess an intrinsic authority. In this view, values like power and magnificence are universally right. So while values such as compassion or equality are less essential or secondary. So others interpret Nietzsche as an anti-realist, rejecting the idea that values are out there waiting to be discovered. Instead, values are subjective, shaped by individual preference or cultural constructs. From this perspective, what is valuable to one may hold no meaning to another. So much like how a desert traveler values water differently than a sailor lost at sea. Still, others see Nietzsche as walking the middle path between this, a kind of subjectivist who believes values emerge from our perspective and commitments. In this view, values gain their weight not because they are universal, but because they resonate deeply with the reality of who we are and what we pursue. So that just furthers my argument that the deeper that you go into yourself, becoming you, the more valuable you become. That's why they say it's subjective. It's inherently of our preferences, of what we desire, what we want. It goes, all this study on value, it goes right back to what we want, who we are. Nietzsche's critique of moral values, especially those rooted in Judeo-Christian traditions, questions whether these values stifle human flourishing and creativity. If our values are rooted in weakness or the desire to control others through guilt and fear, are they truly valuable? Or do they chain us to a diminished existence, preventing us from becoming what Nietzsche calls the overman? So, what he's talking about, I'll go over that again. Nietzsche's critique of the moral herd, moral values. So he criticized Christianity a lot. And it's funny because I believe in God, I believe in Jesus, but I actually, on the contrary, agree with what he's talking about. Because he's challenging the idea of how Christianity is and of the moral herd. Because he's like, if our values are rooted in the weakness or the desire to control others through guilt and fear, are they truly valuable? Or do they chain us to a diminished existence, preventing us from becoming powerful, reaching our full potential? Now, how Christianity is taught, I believe it's taught a lot on pity and on sincerity, which I think are overrated, especially sincerity, overrated virtues. I believe that it's more it should be more taught. And I'm not saying the Bible talks about this. I'm saying how it's taught. And I'm not saying this is what Jesus talked about. I'm saying this is how it's taught. And so how it's perceived. You know, instead of pitying other people or feeling so sincere for other people or just following along with the moral values of the herd, we instead of you feeling sincere or sad for the poor, you take action for the poor not to be poor. And how you do that is the people who are poor, you don't, how is the word I'm looking for? You don't gratify or you don't cheer on self-destructive, counterproductive behavior. Because for the most part, people who end up in the situation, terrible situation that they ended up in, is their fault. At the end of the day, it is your fault. And you have to explain to people that in order for you to gain more power and for you to become better, a better human being, and for you to advance to the next level in life, I don't care what happened to you, whether you believe it was your fault or not, or rather it was a reality that was your fault or not, you have to take ownership and self-responsibility for you to get to the next level. Because if you don't, you're never going to gain any power. You're never going to become better. You're just not. That's just the fact of life. It doesn't matter if it's your fault or not. You need to take ownership, complete ownership and full responsibility of whatever happened in your life, whatever happened to you, so you can get to the next plateau. If you don't, then you can lay in your own pity. You can be right. Be right. Fine. You can be right at the expense of being better. Responsibility, self-responsibility is what's more important, significant to become better and to get to the next life. Period. It doesn't matter what color you are, what gender you are, what you believe. Doesn't matter. It's a fact. So that's kind of what Nietzsche is talking about. These teachings and these beliefs, it compromises our self, the self of the human being. So Nietzsche's provocative exploration of metaethics forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Are the values we hold truly ours, or are they inherited and questioned? Do these values serve our growth and creativity, or do they hold us back? Is there a universal measure of value, or is value always subjective and fluid? As Nietzsche reminds us, the search for value isn't about finding static truths. It's about creating, affirming, and embodying the values that align with our highest potential. Practical alternatives to a calm, do hard things. Build complex skills. Seek the extraordinary. Embrace the divine power of early creation. So, I'm saying practical alternatives to overcome problems, issues that is facing your life to connect you more with the divine and connect you more with your highest self. These are just a little few things that I came up with. Do hard things. Build complex skills. Seek the extraordinary. Embrace the divine power of early creation. The hard things that do hard things. Example, growth begins at the edge of your comfort zone. Hard task expands your mind and reveals strengths you didn't know you had. Building complex skills, mastery demands time, effort, and resources. These investments pay dividends, making you scarce and highly valued. Seek the extraordinary. Surround yourself with people who inspire you, challenge you, and push you to higher standards. Embrace the divine power of early creation. Start your mornings between 3 to 5 a.m. This sacred window is when creativity flows unencumbered by the noise of the world. Eliminating distractions, saying no to the world and yes to yourself. These are the hours that you can do that. No to them, yes to you. Eliminating distractions, write, reflect, create. This is where infinite value begins, in my perspective. 3 to 5 a.m. begins. So I have this thing called the 3 to 5 a.m. I have this newsletter called the 3 to 5 a.m. Writer. I have a journal that I'm going to come out with called the 3 to 5 a.m. Writer Journal. And every morning I write 3 to 5 a.m. I listen to the divine and I write. I just write whatever I'm feeling, write whatever I'm thinking about, write what my emotions are. I just write. It can be dumb, it can be stupid, it doesn't matter. I embrace being a fool because I want to learn, I want to explore, I want to discover, and then after I discover, I want to explore the setting that I'm in, this moment that I've never experienced, because every moment is a new moment, every moment is a new moment. So this setting is it's the same setting, but it's a new setting because it's a new time. So I want to become better. I want to be on the path, this alignment, this obsession of facing the higher version of myself, of connecting with the divine. So I want to be used, and I want to be able to discover and explore and come up with thoughts and ideas and create things that I've never beyond thought that I can imagine. really just exercising my imagination, digging deep into my mind, the subconscious mind, and tapping into the super intelligence, and just trying to connect all that into distributing into the paper just right. But I have to become a fool first to even do it, because I don't know. So I explore the unknown. I discover being a fool. I'm comfortable with that, because that's where it starts. So value is not finite, it's not transactional, it's infinite when it starts from within. Reclaim your connection to the divine. Peel back the layers of your potential, invest in yourself and others. This is the path to true value. Not because of what you produce, or only what you produce, but because of who you are. Value is a significant topic I'll explore further in future writings, so stay tuned. Help others to find the treasure within themselves. The more you become you, and the more you help others to find the treasure that is already within themselves, their heart, to discover the treasure within their heart, that makes you even more valuable of an individual, because you're helping others to discover their true potential and to become more valuable of themselves. So how are you becoming more you today? Reflect on that. Thank you so much, and have a great day.